Now let's explain how this profit maximization rule, marginal revenue equals marginal cost, looks for the perfectly competitive firm. The main thing is for the perfectly competitive firm, price is equal to marginal revenue. And I'm going to kind of prove that to you kind of in three ways, the way I did it for one of the sections before. Say you have a firm which is perfectly competitive. That means that the price, regardless of the quantity, is always going to be $10. So when you produce one quantity, you sell it at $10. When you produce two units of output, you sell each one also at $10. When you produce 3 units of output, you're going to sell the 3 of them at $10 each. How much is the total revenue for every time you sell different units? But when you sell no output, the total revenue is 0. But when you sell 1 unit, the total revenue is $10. So the marginal revenue of the first unit is $10. When you produce 2 units, you sell each one at $10, so you make total revenue of $20. And the marginal revenue of the second unit is also $10. And when you sell 3 units, you sell each one at $10, so when you sell the 3 of them, you make $30. And the marginal revenue of the third unit is also $10. So notice that it wasn't a coincidence that because your price is constant, it doesn't change, every time you increase quantity by 1 unit, your additional revenue, which is your marginal revenue, is always going to be the price, $10. So every time one more unit is added in a perfectly competitive firm, the additional revenue is actually equal to the price. So what we're saying here is that the price equals the marginal revenue. Now we can also see this if we actually look at the... So how does profit maximization look for a perfectly competitive firm? Well, the main thing is for the perfectly competitive, we said that profit maximization is marginal revenue equals marginal cost. But for the perfectly competitive firm, price always equals marginal revenue. So therefore, profit maximization for a perfectly competitive firm is going to be equal to price equals marginal cost. Because price and marginal revenue for the perfectly competitive firm are the same. So basically, all I have to prove here to you is that price and marginal revenue for the perfectly competitive firm are always the same, to kind of prove to you that for the perfectly competitive firm, the profit maximizing equation is really price equals marginal cost. Let me prove to you in 3 different ways. So let's look at it in a table first. So this is a perfectly competitive industry that sells output at a price of $10. So what is the total revenue for this firm at different levels of output? Well, when the output is 0, total revenue is 0. But when the output is 1, total revenue is 10. When the output is 2, total revenue is 20. And when the output is 3, they sell 3 units at $10 each, so the total revenue is 30. So what was the marginal revenue of each additional unit? Well, the marginal revenue of the first unit is $10 because total revenue went up by 10. The marginal revenue of the second unit is also $10 because when the second unit is produced, total revenue increased by 10. And the total revenue of the third unit also $10 because revenue increased by that much with that unit. And that should make sense, right? Because since the price is the same, every time you increase output by 1 unit, the change in revenue, which is the marginal revenue, is always the price. Now we can also explain this by using a little bit of calculus, right? So let's get rid of this part so we can write it here. So what we're saying here is that suppose that total revenue at any point is going to be equal to a constant times output. Let's say 10 times Q. Well, the marginal revenue, which is the derivative of the total revenue equation in this case, is going to be equal to the constant, which is the price, in this case $10. So clearly when we see that marginal revenue is the derivative of the total revenue equation, is one of the terms in that total revenue, which is price, is constant, then the derivative is going to be equal to that constant, which is the price. And then finally, we put this in a graph. What we're saying here is that for the firm, if you have Q here and P here, for the firm, the marginal revenue is going to be exactly, this is a price, it's going to be equal to exactly this price. So the marginal revenue is equal to this constant, which is the price at any point. Now, as it turns out, this marginal revenue comes from the market demand, right? So what happens here is that the firm is taking the price from the demand curve, which is not perfectly elastic, right? So this is a firm, and this is a market. But for the individual firm, The demand curve for the individual firm is in fact perfectly elastic because the price is always the same. So if you sell corn in a perfectly competitive industry, even though the demand for corn, let's say at the country level, is not perfectly elastic, the demand for corn for one farmer is going to be perfectly elastic because it's going to be equal to the price. At the calculus stuff, right? Total revenue is going to be equal to price times quantity. But for a perfectly competitive firm, this price is a constant. So when you take the derivative of total revenue, which is, as we said, the marginal revenue, this is going to be equal to the constant, which is the price. For instance, say that your total revenue equation was equal to 10Q. So the price is constant as 10, and the total revenue will look like this. The marginal revenue for this perfectly competitive firm with a price constant at $10 is going to be the derivative of the total revenue equation, which is going to be equal to 10. So again, we found that the total revenue and the price are exactly the same for a perfectly competitive firm. Well, for a graph, basically means that this is a firm, right, produces an output, but that firm, since it's a perfectly competitive firm, is going to take that output from the market, from the demand curve. So let's say if the price at a point is at any point it did like that, the firm is going to price at $10. And it's going to have to do the best they can with $10. So if we have price on the vertical axis of those curves, this is the market, what we're saying is even though the market demand curve is downward sloping for the firm, the market demand or the firm demand is always a straight line, and that's equal to the marginal revenue. All right. So what we're saying is that if you sell in the perfectly competitive market, let's say corn, even though the demand for corn is downward sloping, it's not perfectly elastic, the firm demand, the demand for each farmer, is perfectly elastic because price is always equal to marginal revenue.